What's going on, everyone? In today's video, I'm installing the OS Giken SuperLock 1.5-way differential for my ND Miata. Now, few options available on the market when it comes to differentials. There's the OS Giken, there's, I believe, Kaz makes one, I know Cusco makes one. However, the OS Giken is, bar none, one of the best on the planet. A lot of that just boils down to how intricate, how well machined and how well designed this unit is. It has got the most clutch packs, so it offers the most tunability of any of the differentials on the market, and it tends to be the most quiet, from what I've been told, from all of the other options on the market, short from using the OEM LSD. Now, if you haven't watched my last video where I discussed some of the updates that I've done in my car, to get into it, basically, even though my vehicle was equipped with the OEM LSD, it lacked in terms of its performance. Manufacturers are going to give you kind of as best of a compromise as they can right out of the box, but they're not going to give you the most hardcore performance-oriented parts. And they do this because they want to maintain compliance in the car. A hardcore differential is going to clunk and chatter while making tight right-hand turns. Your average buyer that's buying this car doesn't want that. They're going to think the car's broken. A lot of people assume when they drive a car with a proper LSD in it that there's something wrong with the differential because it clunks, it chatters, it makes noise, but that's just the locking effect of the differential. Now, I will say, and I will highly recommend, that if you're going to use this differential, definitely invest in the OS250R fluid. When I initially installed this differential, I used the Motul competition gear oil, the 75140, and it is a recommended and approved competition oil to use in the OS Giken limited slip from OS. However, they do strongly recommend using their fluid. And I will say that even though the Motul oil, and I use it in my transmission, works very, very well, and it worked extremely well in the differential, when it would get to temperature, there was definitely an audible clunking that would come from the rear diff, as well as like you could feel it coming from the rear diff. Now, I didn't think anything of it because I said to myself, well, that's a rear differential for you. That's going to happen. A friend of mine, a racer friend on Instagram, reached out. We were discussing, he's got a BRZ and he put the diff in his car. And he said, dude, you have to go to the OS250 fluid. It made a world of difference. And now the weight rating on the OS250R is 80 to 250. So considerably higher than the Motul 140. So I said, why not? I'll buy the unicorn tiers, I'll put it in the rear differential and see how it goes. Not overly cheap, but honestly, not super expensive either. It was like $70. Shout out to NV Auto. Thank you for providing the fluid. They had it in stock. I grabbed, I guess, a liter of this stuff. I put it in and the diff went super quiet. I mean, noticeably. It doesn't clunk anymore. It doesn't do anything, almost to the point where I'm like, I have an OEM differential, but I have all the benefits of the locking and everything else that you want the diff to do, with none of the downsides. I have no clunking, no audible noises. The only noticeable, because I'm super sensitive when it comes to these things, is that when I'm driving the car on acceleration or decel, when it is cold, it does feel like I have a little more drag. Okay. So when I'm accelerating and the car is cold, the diff fluid is cold, it feels like my parking brake is up like a click or two. I can feel the car just dragging. It doesn't, the rolling resistance is there. It doesn't roll as freely, I would say. And I notice it especially on decel. When you let off the throttle, the car like ties down a little bit quicker. It doesn't roll, doesn't have that free roll like it did before. And I'm going to attribute that to the fact that A, you've got the clutch discs and everything like locking up, doing its thing. But B, you've also got this like essentially honey maple syrup in the differential that's just kind of slowing everything down, right? Now, when you get the diff to operating temperature, it feels no different. It honestly, it feels just the same as it did. It feels OEM. I have no clunks, I have no noise, but with all the benefits of getting that wheel to stick and getting all of the grip and that positive traction out of the corner. So I can't emphasize enough by using the OS250R. All right, so with that out of the way, let's get right into it. I intended on making more video footage of doing this. However, I was pretty limited in terms of my time and ability. And quite frankly, guys, doing this, video and install stuff, it's super time consuming. So I did what I could. So bear with me. I've included the video footage here, and you're going to notice a few things. When installing this in the ND platform, you have to clearance the case. When you remove the OEM differential, you have to actually grind away at the front and rear cover. Okay. A lot of people think you just got to grind away at the front cover. And if you've watched any Putty Mod videos, shout out Putty Mod, your videos are fantastic. He's got 3 videos up to date for the ND and Fiata differentials. Thanks to him, I was able to get the torque specs because I couldn't find it in the factory service manual for the main cap bolts and the housing bolts. Housing bolts, there's 6 of them, I believe. They're 35 pounds, if I remember correctly. And the main cap bolts are an astonishing 80 to 85 pounds, I believe. When you're installing this, according to OS Giken, they actually have sublet instructions on their website. You have to grind down not only the front cover or case, but you also have to grind down a little bit out of the rear cover as well. I did both, and the removal of the differential itself, overall, not terrible. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to have to drop the entire subframe. It's a bit labor intensive, and shout out to Dave over at Dave's Garage. Thank you so much for the ability to use your space. I was able to use his space, his lift and hoist and everything, and I did this myself in a day. It wasn't terrible. Basically, you lift the car, you remove the rear subframe, so you're going to have to pull the suspension, the knuckles off, all that other good stuff, drive shaft, the power brace, all that's coming out, drop the exhaust, all that comes out. You lower the whole subframe as a complete assembly with the diff. Then remove the differential, and the next thing you're going to do is crack open the case. Once you crack open the case, you're going to pull the differential. I highly recommend that you buy new bearings, okay? It goes without saying that if you're just replacing like for like, at the very minimum, you may as well replace the bearings. You're already in there. So I bought brand new bearings, brand new sleeves, put it all together. So you're going to want to remove everything, transfer the ring gear. Once you transfer over the ring gear, you're going to want to torque these down with some Loctite. I paint marked them, put it all back together. I pressed the new bearings onto the differential, put them in the case for a test fit, and then clearance the case accordingly. So I clearanced the front half, and then I clearanced the rear case or the rear cover, and then made sure that everything was good according to OS Giken's instructions. After that was done, I went out over to Honda, bought myself some trusty Honda Bond because I don't trust anything else. Honda Bond is the OG as far as gasket sealant is concerned. Put some Honda Bond on the case, made sure that the housing and the rear cover was clean, resealed it, which, by the way, before you reseal and after you clearance the case and the rear cover, you're going to want to wash this out thoroughly, okay? Because I put a rag inside, a wet rag, to cover the pinion and everything else as best as I could. Like, I jammed it in there so that shavings wouldn't go anywhere. I was using a vacuum. As I'm grinding away at this, to just reduce the amount of debris that was coming off. And even after all of that, I still wash the case clean because you just don't want any of that debris, any of it remnants laying around that's going to get into the bearings and all that other good stuff. So with all that done, I resealed the case, put it all back together, allowed the case to cure for about 24 hours. You could probably do it in less, but I wanted to be sure that I wasn't going to have any leaks. So I allowed the case to cure. Once the case was all cured, I then had put the Motul 75140 competition gear oil in and had driven the car for about 1,000 kilometers or a week to just allow it to break in. Now, OS Giken says that their differentials don't really have a break-in period, and a lot of people say you don't really need to break them in. I, however, still think you've got some friction material, you've got stuff that's going to come off. Why not do a little bit of a break-in? So this is where I used the Motul 75140. I intended to get the OS 250R, but I said, you know what, I'm going to put the Motul in now because I don't want to use the expensive stuff to break in, essentially. And I want to get whatever remnants of material might come off of the carbon discs, or if there's any remnants of any of the shaving debris or any of the aluminum powder that might still be in the case. Even though I thoroughly cleaned it, I wanted to give myself an opportunity to run the fluid through everything and then get it out of the case after about 1,000 kilometers. And I'm happy to report everything is working flawlessly. As a matter of fact, I competed in my first track day. I've put almost 3,000 kilometers on everything, and everything is working fantastic. I hope you enjoy and hope you find it useful if you're doing this yourself. If you have questions, leave me a comment. I'd love to help. All right. Thanks, guys.